Welcome to Boat Building News, the podcast Achieving Excellence, a series of incredible conversations with some of the highest achievers from around the world. I'm excited. This is going to be epic. What a privilege to be able to invite Michael Kurn onto the Achieving Excellence podcast. I guarantee you this will be one of the most motivating conversations you will ever hear. Hi, Michael. I'm so excited to have you as a guest on the Achieving Excellence podcast.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it. It should be a great conversation. So thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. And I'm so excited because normally I get really excited to talk about boats, as everyone knows. But I'm actually thinking I might be able to talk about my other love in this conversation, which is hockey. So I am really excited for this conversation because I don't often get to talk hockey in my job.
Nice. Yeah, no, hockey has been a big part of my journey. I was actually last weekend just gone doing the Pro League in London. So yeah, hockey.
Oh my goodness, I'm obsessed. In fact, I think I might be able to say that I'm more hockey obsessed than I'm boat obsessed, which might surprise a few people. So,
Wow.
Cool. So, in a nutshell, introduce yourself. Tell us, who are you and what is it that you do?
For sure. So my name's Michael Kurn. For the last 15 years, I've been a broadcaster, so been incredibly fortunate to present sporting events all around the globe. Mentioned hockey already. That was one of the first things I did. 2009, off the back of college, Tri-Nations. And if you're based in Southampton way, you'll know of a place called Fleming Park in Eastleigh. No longer there anymore. It's a new Barclay Leisure Centre now, but there was a Tri-Nations tournament, England, Australia, Scotland in the December, indoor hockey. I got asked to host it. PA speakers. I was doing a bit of mobile DJing at the time in my younger years. Put my mobile DJing stuff in there, played some music, made some announcements, and then that began my journey with England hockey, which has been incredible, and that's opened up so many doors in broadcast for me. So been very fortunate. Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games, television, radio, Premier League across the world. So that's kind of one thing that I do. I'm also a commissioned officer in the British Army Reserve, which was a journey I went on only within the last kind of 18 months, 2 years, which has been incredible. And yeah, I just like to help inspire people and do a bit of motivational speaking as well. And I do a bit of consultancy work when it comes to putting events on. So lots of different projects, lots of irons in different fires. But I think my ultimate kind of thing that I like to do and how I kind of sum it up is telling people stories and helping people become the best they can possibly be. So that's kind of my kind of driver really, and why I do what I do.
Yeah, I mean, you brushed over that really quickly, but that's some big projects you've just mentioned. It's actually insane. I had to scroll through some of your background just prior to speaking to you. It's quite overwhelming, the amount of projects you've actually been involved in. I couldn't really keep up. So, congratulations with everything that you've done, really.
Thank you. I struggle to keep up sometimes, if I'm completely honest.
Well, yeah, and this is what surprises me is then at the end you said that you've started as an Army Reserve as well. What inspired that? I mean, where did you get the time?
So I think, like a lot of people, lockdown was a really difficult time, a strange time. And I speak to a lot of people that, despite the difficulties, found positives and actually found time to actually stop for the first time in a very long time and evaluate what they do in life, how they do it, what do they do. So for me, going into lockdown, my career was on this nice little projection. Had a show on national radio. I was doing talk sport on Friday nights. I was presenting the Premier League around the globe. I had a regular spot every weekend broadcasting across the world. And then lockdown happened and everything stopped. And during that period, a lot of those contracts didn't renew. And, there's reasons behind that. And there's some reasons that I don't know. But it was a very difficult period because you would turn on television and everyone's saying, look out for each other. And, you should have each other's back right now. It's difficult. It's not easy. And I got dropped from one or two places with a phone call to my agent, no explanation. Whereas 2 or 3 days before, I'd been speaking to people in the studio and they're like, oh, great, we'll see you on Friday. And then all of a sudden told, we don't need you Friday. Your contract's not being renewed. Hear from nobody, and then all of a sudden the next day on that particular broadcast you're hearing people saying, oh, look out for each other, guys, it's a really tough time. And I'm like, ironic, because you haven't actually asked me how I am, or you've just dropped me from a contract in the middle of a pandemic. I kind of look at life in the sense of, do I moan about it or do I get on with it? And I, from a very young age, you face ups and downs, and I realized at a very young age that when someone makes a decision, they're not most of the time sat at home worrying about it. So the people that decided not to renew my contract aren't sat at home with their family losing sleep about me. So do I sit there and
No.
moan about it and burn bridges and make myself look silly? Or do I just go, do you know what? Respect your decision. Maybe don't agree with it, but fine, that's the direction you'd like to move in. I wish you all the best. Same for me. Let's not close any doors. I'd love to come back one day if there's an opportunity. So I kind of use that lockdown period as a kind of cathartic process off the back of that happening to me, going, well, what am I doing with life? Where am I going? I'm 10, 12, 13, 14 years into this journey. I've done some cool stuff, but
Yeah.
is it going to provide me stability? Clearly not. with a contract that is rolling and just kind of gets dropped out of nowhere and things kind of dry up and don't happen. And a big thing for me has always been about service. I already alluded to one of my big mantras and my big thing that makes me tick is making other people be the best they can possibly be. And weirdly, all goes back to King George VI and my great-grandfather, which is very strange for a 33-year-old to be obsessed by a monarch from the 1930s. But my great-grandfather was awarded the George Medal by King George VI in the Second World War. That inspired my geekiness, I guess, into finding out who these people from history were. So my great-granddad's story, the story of King George VI, and their service and dedication always really inspired me. So I was sat there in lockdown. What am I doing? Contemplating with life. Spoke to a friend of mine who is a REMSO at the local reserve unit in Southampton, 165 Port Maritime. Gave him a quick call and I said, what's the deal with all this reserve bits and pieces? And he said, come down to a drill night and have a look and see what you think. So I went on with the kind of ambition of, right, let's go along, maybe join, do the kind of soldiery bit. And then, it'd be quite cool to maybe go to Sandhurst at some point and do the officer training. Don't know if I'm too old, don't know if I can, but let's see what happens. So I went along, got chatting to a few of the officers there and a few of the soldiers and everyone who kind of runs the unit down there. And by the time I left, I pretty much signed up and had decided that I was just going to go straight to Sandhurst and try that journey. So yeah, it was a kind of bit of a spontaneous decision, but the military had always been a massive part of my life with my great-granddad. My godfather was Scots Guards. So there'd always been that kind of, like a bit of intrigue, I guess, with the military. And just COVID and that time to stop and think, what am I doing? What do I want to achieve in life? How do I want to get there? And that opportunity presented itself. And the last 18 months were a bit of a whirlwind. I commissioned in November last year and I did all my training and all the interviews and all the assessments all within a 12-month period, which was chaos. But I made some incredible friends, met some awesome people, learned some really valuable life lessons. And yeah, it's put me in a really cool place. I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that COVID, which, on the whole was a huge worldwide negative, was the catalyst to something really quite positive for you. And I think it's really interesting. And, as you can imagine, a lot of my conversations feature COVID at some point. And a lot of my conversations are with successful people. And I think that the majority of the people I speak to say that COVID had personally for them on their career and their personality and the direction they're going in life, it had a positive effect on them. And I think that there's almost like two camps, isn't there? There's two types of people that came out of COVID. And I've said this to some of the guests previously, that there's the people that saw COVID as an opportunity, whether that's an opportunity to have the time that they've never had before, an opportunity to reflect on the direction they're going in, an opportunity to start a business they had the time to start. And there's people that saw COVID as an excuse, where they turned around and said, it's not my fault, it's COVID. It's not, it's not my fault, it's this. This is the situation we're in. I can't do anything about it because it's COVID. And I think that there's a distinct difference between which type of person you are and the situation. Now, as we're kind of drawn a line and we're coming off the back of COVID, these few years, the type of success these people are experiencing now compared to the people that used it as an excuse, like, it's mind-blowing, the difference.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting. Like, I was very lucky. I was very blessed. I never caught COVID. I didn't lose any close friends or relatives to COVID, so I was very blessed in that respect. But I think for me and a lot of business owners, when you're self-employed, you have to think fast, you have to adapt, you have to evolve. And there was support from the government, but depending on how you were self-employed, there necessarily wasn't anything. Entertainment's business, there wasn't too much kind of support. A lot of my friends and colleagues, were really struggling. You could, if you had a limited company, you could get a bounce back loan, but you still got to pay that back. There was lots of other things, and there was support for businesses. But if you were employed, there was a very high chance that you could get furlough, or you had some support. So I think, self-employed people that run businesses had to think, and had to think fast. As I said, very fortunate not to have caught COVID or lost anyone, or a family member that didn't have to deal with any loss or anything, like really directly to me. So I did have that space, and I had that time. And as I alluded to, I hadn't ever really stopped in that previous kind of 10, 12, 13 years. So to actually put the brakes on and go, where are we going? What are we doing? I think it was a very interesting time. And I think especially from a business perspective, lots of business had to adapt and evolve. You had pubs, you had people with businesses that were customer facing, that all of a sudden the customers weren't there. And, you have two options. Like you say, you kind of stand there and do nothing, or you go, fine, okay, let's just deal with it. And I like to work on the mantra of 5% of the problem and 95% on the solution. And that's just kind of how I work in every situation. 5% of the problem, 95% on the solution. I think it was Tony Robbins that I first heard say that. I did loads of Tony Robbins stuff in lockdown, and just all these motivational speakers on YouTube. I just kind of had like a motivational festival in my office, just watching all these things, and just like being an open book. I know Tony Robbins isn't for everyone, but I kind of enjoyed some of the stuff I kind of put to one side. But all these different motivational speakers, everyone has. I remember as a kid, someone said to me, you're going to speak to people, and everyone you speak to is going to give you something of knowledge and something of use, and you might not need it right now, and it might not ring true right now, but like kind of keep it here. Don't just ignore it, because one day you'll go, okay, that's what you meant. So yeah, I kind of, COVID for me in a very difficult time, like for lots of people, I tried to make the most out of it to kind of get by, because we had to survive, right? You go to fight or flight. That's kind of survival mode, basic human nature. You deal with it, or you run and you hide. And luckily I kind of ran towards it a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, for myself, I was in the recruitment industry during COVID, so you can imagine that. I mean, who was recruiting? Everyone was furloughed, and our whole entire business was furloughed apart from myself. So I was, I was fighting for myself, but also I was judged on how successful I was, to how many of my colleagues who were friends of mine could come back and resume their job, which was quite a stressful situation. But without it, Boat Building News wouldn't have existed, and I wouldn't be doing what I absolutely love to do right now. So for me it was at the time horrific and awful, and played to every weakness I had. But coming out of it, gosh, I learned so much, and I gained so much that that just changed my life. So but then, like you say, same with me. I didn't experience any direct loss from COVID, so it's very easy to take that view, I guess, if you've not been in that situation.
I think it's like it's all sport, isn't it, as well? If you relate it back to sport, that you don't learn from your victories, you learn from your defeats. And in a sporting context, like relating it to COVID, in a very kind of surface level kind of thing, is that was a tough time for everyone. That wasn't a successful, we're flying high, the economy's good. This is like a defeat. We're struggling right now. And you have to learn from it, and you have to adapt and have to evolve. So yeah, I think it was an interesting time. And I say it's great to hear of the stories of people that, managed to adapt and evolve and found their true passion and their true calling, right? Back to that whole getting dropped from contracts. No one really cares about you. And I've watched something in lockdown, and again, I saw it again a few months ago, and it kind of basically said, if you were to lose your life tomorrow, your employer would replace you within like 3-4 weeks. And the brutality of that, and it's a really brutal, harsh kind of like sentence. But if you were to sadly leave this earth tomorrow, within 4 weeks, most people would have forgotten about you and moved on. And it's kind of just really reaffirms that you need to look after yourself, do things that you love, look after your loved ones, your family, your friends, the people that are close to you, and do the things that make you happy. Like take the leap of faith. You'll always. It's a very easy thing to kind of say, but you can always make money. Like you can always find a job somewhere. If you're willing to, there is always work. There is always something to do. If you're prepared to, go. I did it in lockdown. I would go from presenting, pre-lockdown, go to presenting something at the O2 Arena to working in a pub the next morning to sweep the floors to pay for the train ticket. So if you're prepared to do whatever it takes to put the food on the table and do what you've got to do, you can always find money, and you can always, it's not as easy as it sounds in just a sentence, but there's always a will and there's always a way.
Yeah.
You can always do it, but you've got to find that kind of happiness. I think the era of people just doing a 9 to 5 they hate, especially when you look at the younger generation now, just doesn't happen. The amount of turnover I see in young people with employment, that I got bored of that, I've gone and done something else. I've got bored of that, I've gone and done something else. And you compare that to previous generations, our grandparents and some people's parents, they've had the same job since they left college or school or university, and they've done it for 30, 40 years. And the world's changed. It's really, really interesting how business is then going to adapt to that, because how do you keep and maintain that talent that you've got, that talent pool to keep your business growing, while we've got a species of human and generations that have now decided, well, actually, we need to have fun and we need to do the things that make us tick, because life's too short. So it's a very interesting equation. And I work for myself, and I don't employ anyone at the moment. So luckily I don't have to worry about that one just yet.
It is a balancing act. So I do look after a team who, I don't like to admit it, they are a different generation to me. And it is hard because sometimes, I feel like I'm from the hustle generation, where I'm loyal to my employer and I work above and beyond with no expectation of additional reward for that, because I like to know that I've done the job right, because that's how I am. But then there is a time where, the reality does kick in. In my previous role, for instance, so loyal, gave everything, and it did suddenly dawn on me, and I'm familiar with the quote that you said about, your employer won't remember you. It suddenly dawned on me that I was creating a beautiful retirement for somebody that was going to sail off into the sunset and never give me a call again. And it was, and I realized, and I thought, what am I doing? And you have to look after yourself. And then when I employ people who are younger generation, and you're right, they have a totally different outlook on life. It's so easy to say, but why aren't you as committed as the generation I've come from, or the background that I know? But then in reality, you think to yourself, hang on, or should I be learning from them? And are they the generation that are putting these boundaries in place that say, no, I will live my life, and I will value time, and I will value my, work-life balance. So then I suddenly thought, hang on, maybe they've got it right. And I'm sure there's a happy medium in between. And I'm sure that there's sort of a bit of one and a bit of other that probably works, much better. But it does suddenly make you realize that maybe I've been doing it wrong the whole time. And maybe this new generation and their mindset is there to teach me things.
No, completely. And you mentioned the word loyalty there, and actually I think loyalty is still so, so important. But again, a lesson I've learned is where do you place that loyalty? And it's sometimes as hard as it is stepping away from a situation where you've been incredibly loyal, you've bent over backwards to make things happen. And when that loyalty isn't replicated back, it's sometimes very, very tough, but you've got to make a decision. I've got a couple of things at the moment where I've put some tremendous loyalty into a few projects, and you're not getting that replicated back. And it's basic manners, basic common, just common respect for each other. And sometimes you have to go, do you know what? Maybe I'm not ready to end this project yet, but I think maybe I need to, just for me and for that loyalty back. It's a two-way street. It's a bit like respect, loyalty, two-way street.
Give and take, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like you say, I'm very much like you in the sense of I'm incredibly loyal. I'll bend over backwards, and I won't make a decision on helping someone based on what's the reward the other side of it. I do it because I love it. I often joke that I'm not employed, I'm fun employed, because I do stuff I enjoy, and I'm very blessed to do that. But for me, if I need to spend an extra hour somewhere because I'm going to help someone who helped me during that day de-rig so he can get home quicker and see his family, where I could just jump in a car an hour before, I'll stay a bit longer. I don't mind it. It's there's that good. It's not good to be nice or nice to be good, isn't it? There's the quote on that kind of lines actually. But it's actually if you can help people and be a good person, it all comes back round again.
So, thinking back of your career, I guess that, you've had to make some pretty big decisions, but what's been the biggest and hardest decision you've had to make?
Oh, tough question. Biggest and the hardest decision I've had to make. I think the hardest situation I've been in was definitely with the army stuff, I think, because it put me out of my comfort zone. So I think the hardest moments I've ever had was, so I don't really talk about that much actually. I was in a field on my army training, middle of nowhere, 2:00 in the morning, trees moving, tired, hungry, on stag. So basically when you're doing exercise in the field, you sit in a hole basically defending your position. And it's all drills, you've got to do it right, you've got to deliver. And the standard at Sandhurst is incredibly high. We had an amazing colour sergeant who was awesome. In the time, you're thinking, why is he being so tough on us? And some of the decisions he made us do, you're like, why are we doing this? And then in hindsight, you then find out that other sections weren't doing what you were doing. Your standard was here and they maybe weren't doing all the extra little bits you were doing. But actually, those extra little bits that colour sergeant made us do made that experience so much better. And I wouldn't change it for the world, even though digging holes until 2:30 in the morning to then fill them back in the next morning isn't something I would regularly choose to do. But I was sat in this shell scrape at 2 a.m, and for some random reason, just my body decided, why am I here? And I went through a bit of an emotional roller coaster to work out why I was there. In one sentence, I'm thinking, why are you here? Just like, go home. You don't need to prove this to anyone. Who are you trying to prove this to?
You don't have to do this. Like, you could just go home.
Yeah, and in my head, I'm trying to prove myself to two people that are dead and are never coming back. My nan died 6-7 years ago. My great granddad I never met, but they're two people I hold in the highest esteem, and always want to do my best for my great granddad, what he did in the Second World War. And we lost my nan early, so there was always unfinished business, unwords said, and moments that never happened. So I'm sat in the shell scrape, just kind of emotionally not really with it, on an army exercise. And a few of the guys and girls in my section were like, you're right. I'm like, yeah, no, just I'm all right. So I'm going from absolute emotion to the next minute, Winston Churchill and King George wouldn't have given up, like, pull yourself together, get on with this, like, you're in a field, like, get on with it. And then the captain came and sat next to me and said, Mr. Kurn, you're all right? Yeah, no worries. So I went, no, you're not. And I went, yeah, maybe you're right. But I'm not going anywhere. And we had a bit of a conversation about everything and just how I hadn't really dealt with certain things. I hadn't dealt with the fact that my nan had passed away. I hadn't dealt with all the TV stuff and just bottled it up and didn't really speak to anyone about it. And then here I am, you're tired, hungry, you're sleep deprived, you're on the go. It's the whole point of military training, is to test you to your max. How do you react? Do you give up and run away, or do you stand up for the fight almost? And had a conversation and dealt with it. Next morning, body didn't want to play ball. I was just couldn't control emotions. It was the hardest bit. And it made it even harder because my team were around me. They're like, what do you need? Like, we've got your back. And that made it harder because, having been in the broadcast industry for such a long time, no one really has your back, if I'm being completely honest. The producers all want your job. Let's be honest. If you're sat in a radio studio, the producer out there wants to get on air. He wants your job these days. Gone are the day I personally feel of that relationship with your producer, where you and your producer were like phenomenal. You worked together. You grew together. A lot of situations now, the amount of producers that want to be presenters, and I could run a long list of people that I've worked with that basically wanted my job, and that's cool, right? Because I was once that young, hungry person, and I've got nothing wrong with that, and that's just the way it works. But that kind of trust relationship is very difficult. So when you're in a state of vulnerability and you've got 15 people all rallying around you, going, "What do you need? We'll sort you out. We've got your back," made it even harder. And literally, I went out, delivered the day's task, came back into the harbour area that night, and I was smiling again and kind of got through it. But it was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, of having to deal with that in a high pressure situation. And it was just contemplating why I was there, and the pressure around that situation of no one wants to have to go back to their family and friends and say, oh, by the way, I didn't pass Sandhurst. It's the hardest, toughest, best leadership course in the world. And, it's not easy to get in. You have to do all this assessments and tests to get in. And then as a reserve officer, it's 8 weeks that you spend there in total, and it's broken into different blocks. But obviously you go there, and the icing on the cake is being proud as punch with all your family stood on that parade square, passing out. And you're sat there on these exercises, and there is a constant hanging over your head that you could potentially get kicked off the course if you muck up. If you fail, you do something wrong, you're out. There's a limit to kind of second chances because it's a development situation. But if you don't meet the grade, you're off. And the fact that all your family know your date of passing out, and they're getting their outfits ready, they're coming to see you, and you don't want to have to make that phone call to say I wasn't good enough. And that physically, mentally is an incredible roller coaster. I wouldn't change it for the world. It was amazing in
Yeah.
hindsight. But when you're sat there, there's moments of self-doubt. I remember before I went back for the final module, just sat thinking, can I do this? And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it's made me so much better. So many of my friends have said since coming out of Sandhurst, like, you've changed, like, in a good way. You seem so more comfortable with yourself. You seem so much more assured in a good way. Like, you've kind of
Yeah.
almost like found who you are. So yeah, I think that's the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with, because let's be honest, running around a sports pitch with a microphone isn't the hardest of challenges in life, which obviously I very much enjoy.
But the thing is, actually, that's actually made me feel quite emotional hearing how hard it is, because I don't think I've ever stopped to think. You hear of people going through army training and being at Sandhurst and passing out, and you don't realise actually how hard it is. But also, what a contrast! Your leader in that situation. What a contrast to the way he dealt with you, to your leader. As in the producers who were doing your show in COVID. Where they just went, gave you no support whatsoever. And the difference in that's made in you now compared to compared to your TV career, that, they obviously just ditched you and you were disposable and they didn't give a second thought. So you must have been quite surprised that, hang on a minute, I've not had anyone deal with me in this way when I've hit rock bottom before.
Yeah, no, completely. And it was incredible, because you do have I very much have imposter syndrome, right? That fear of failure. Like, how have I ended up
I
here?
think everyone does, because I always think
Yeah,
it's just me, but every time I mention it to someone, they're like, I've got that.
Yeah, no, completely. And look, my TV career stood pitchside at Olympic Games in Rio, World Cup, Cricket World Cup semi-final at Lords. Like, how have I, lad from Southampton, like, how have I managed this? Like, incredible.
Yeah.
But I think, you have that fear when you're of yourself, really, of, am I good enough? I want to do this. I don't want to fail. Everyone has a fear of failure, but at the same time, you have imposter syndrome. Like, how have I got this far? How have I ended up at the world's best military and leadership academy in the world? How have I managed that? How am I here? What have I done? Because I try and be incredibly self-deprecating. Like, if someone tries to give me a compliment, I'm like, I find it really awkward. I'm like, thanks. Like, I'm kind of, I'm just me. I'm nothing special. I love what I do. I wake up every day and try and enjoy every single moment. And you kind of have these moments of, like, how have I ended up here? And, you do have that fear then of, like, when's someone just going to tap me on the shoulder and go, right, come on, found you out now, off you go. And it puts a pressure in. And to have that support structure around you is incredible. And sometimes the military does get a bad rep. Sometimes there's nothing's perfect. And times change and things change. But everyone I encountered at Sandhurst, and everyone I've encountered so far, even with my reserve unit and my interaction I've had with regular soldiers as well, has been that it's an incredibly supportive environment. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah, having that support structure and that welfare element is so important. And I know it's something I'd like to try and tackle one day, is that welfare and support for individuals that work for themselves or are freelancers, because there isn't that support structure. There isn't someone in HR you can go and have a chat with, or you can't go around everyone wants to work from home these days, but when you're in the office, you could go around the coffee machine and have a chat with someone. Those support structures are really important. I've got a few group chats with a few mates and stuff that are all kind of self-employed, and we sometimes use that as a little place to vent, a little place to get a bit of support off each other. And actually, that was one of those big things, that having that for the first time in that kind of scenario, which was incredibly high pressure, was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think, you can't underestimate, you mentioned that, you wanted to make two people proud, and, you can't underestimate the power that is. That's an advantage, really, because, I mean, I'm a bit similar in the fact that I recently ran the London Marathon, and the fear I had, I mean, I started it crying, and it was fear. It was real fear tears, nerves and fear. And the fear actually was, I can't come all this way with my kids knowing that mummy's running a marathon and then not go back with a medal and not have finished it. And it's not even for myself. It was like, how do I face? And in those last 2 miles, when it's hard, that's what got me through. And then I think, how lucky am I that I've got that feeling that I want to make people proud, or I don't want to let them down? Because if I didn't feel that strongly, I probably would have stopped. And so I wonder, so actually you're really lucky to feel that you want to make those people proud, because that's, if somebody hasn't got that, well, what's their motivation when things get really tough, like tougher than they can handle? That's what I always go to. I think of my kids and I think, God, if they think that I've failed, that's, it's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it can be too easy to quit these days.
Yeah.
It's very easy to kind of go, yeah, I'm done. I'm not interested. And actually staying power is a massive, massive attribute to have, to stick when the going gets tough. It's very easy to walk away from a situation, and I guess it's same with like relationships, isn't it? You kind of see it these days, it's, you go back generations and grandparents, they stay together through thick and thin, and you see relationships these days. It's very easy for someone to say, oh yeah, I'm done, off to the next one. And actually that little bit of staying power, that little bit of hard work when the going gets tough, it's worth it. And it's, long term, it's incredible. And I think, I sometimes put too much pressure on myself, if I'm completely honest, to be. And I think the thing is, it's never for anyone else. It's a sense that I'm doing this for me because I want to be the best I can possibly be for me and the people I care about. There's no pressure of doing it because I want to look good in front of all my mates. I don't care. Like, my mates like me for who I am. They don't need me to achieve things to be my mates. It's that pressure I put on myself because I want to deliver a standard, and I have a standard of the way I conduct myself as a human being, a standard of things that I like to do. And it's a pressure I put on myself, which sometimes may be too much, but hey, was it diamonds get made under pressure, right? Or something like that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just full of
Not
quotes.
trying to say I'm a diamond, by the way. I'm not trying to big myself up there, but for a lot of people, diamonds are cool things, and that's made from pressure. So
I mean, you're quite sort of public facing in everything you do. I mean, how tiring is that? Do you have times where you think, do you know what? I just want to look rubbish, see no one, and just turn my phone off?
Yes and no. I love people, and I love meeting people, and I love my own time and I love my own space, but I get very bored very easily. I literally am like a Labrador puppy that needs constant entertainment. So I need to be doing something. Now, I can't sit around and watch television and have a night off. Like, if my diary's got a free evening, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm like lost. So for me, I love being around people. My downtime is in the car. I do a lot of driving, so podcasts on in the car and relaxing and thinking time and going for a run and things like that. But I love people. I love meeting people. I've spent the last 4 days presenting the Pro League hockey in London and working with all the amazing hockey makers. I'm very
jealous of that, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's great. I absolutely love it. And I've been very lucky to kind of do major sporting competitions. But I think when you love what you do, don't get me wrong. We all love going to the gym with a baseball cap on and not having to speak to anyone for a few hours in the gym. But no, I'm very much a people person, and I love it. And I love hearing people's story. I think that's why I love it so much. Like, I just find humans interesting, and I love everyone's ambitions and goals. And so, I'm never kind of just, oh my God, leave me alone. I want some space. I don't put my personal life on social media, so I try and keep that as a bit of a precious thing. So family and that I don't put on social media. I just put work stuff. And if I was completely honest, if I didn't do the job I do with the broadcasting and the kind of motivational stuff and trying to inspire people, would I be on social media? Mostly not. It just doesn't, from a personal perspective, doesn't really appeal to me. But from a business perspective, I love it. It's great because you get to meet amazing people and speak to people. But I like to keep my personal life is mine, and that's the kind of I don't put personal stuff on there. But I know I love people, so I don't really have that.
I can relate to that so much. I mean, my majority of my job is social media. It's videos and it's podcasting, which, if you love people and you love people's stories and people's ambitions, like podcasting, it's addictive. Like the conversations I get to have, when it's podcast time, it's my favorite time of the week. I absolutely adore it. Maybe I'm just nosy, possibly, but I do love it. But it is tough. Like, sometimes I just think I just want to close that front door and I just want to just see no one. So I think I have these times where I get overwhelmed and I go, I just want to switch off. So I always wonder when I speak to people that are similar and quite sort of like public facing, whether they also feel that.
Mm-hmm. No,
it's
completely
hard to be smiley, I think, and enthusiastic 24/7, because that's not natural, is it? You have times where you think, I just want to be nothing.
Yeah, no, I can be 24/7. Yeah. I'm literally, wow. I'm definitely a mix between the Duracell bunny and the Andrex puppy. I think that's my that's my kind of who I am.
You see, I've got a bit of a fiery side where I can be happy, smiley, enthusiastic, and then I will go a million miles an hour the other direction, and then I want to be on my own for an hour, and then I'll be back to being happy, it's fine, enthusiastic.
Yeah.
That must be horrible to live with.
See, I love my own company, like in certain scenarios, like, so I do like a bit of me time. I think it's important to have that bit of me time, but yeah, I can't go for too long. Otherwise I'm just kind of my wit's end. I need people.
Yeah. So how much do you think your success personally and success in general, how much of that do you think is down to sort of somebody's mindset? I mean, for instance, if you have, a football player or a hockey, let's say hockey, because we're talking hockey, a hockey player with incredible talent, but a poor mindset, or you've got an average, fairly good hockey player, but with an incredible mindset. Do you know what I mean? How much do you think that plays a difference in the success that they experience?
Mindset's incredibly important. If you want to achieve something, you've got to want it with every ounce of you, because it isn't easy. It is tough. You can't be the best at your chosen field or your chosen profession if you don't have the right mindset. Growing up, I played football, and there were so many talented footballers that never made it because they just didn't have the right mindset. And you have to, because you have to be successful. You have to do the things that no one else will do. And whether that means making a sacrifice to miss family occasions, it means making a sacrifice to not go out with your mates on a weekend. You have to do it. And it's all about mindset, because it's about bigger picture. You have to have that long vision ahead of you, that long and winding road, and make that decision for you. But it all comes down to that motivation and mindset, that how bad do you want it? I think that's the ultimate thing. You have to ask yourself, are you prepared to get up at 5 a.m. every morning? Are you prepared to go the extra mile? Are you prepared to go to bed late, get up early, drive somewhere, come back, go deliver that, pick that up, do that? And that comes from a strong mindset. But you've got to be motivated to want to do it. Like those footballers that I played with that didn't have the right mindset for it. Maybe they were gifted at football, but football wasn't their thing. And that's why you have to find your passion, and you have to do the things you love, like you with the podcasting and getting to meet people. I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed to be in a position that I get to do things I'm passionate about. But I think in 2023, if you're at college, at school, or you're at any chance and point in your life, you can find something that makes you tick. If you start it as a side hustle and then you grow it into a business, or you just do it as a hobby, but you have to have the right mindset if you want to succeed in it. If you want to, lots of people set up little businesses in lockdown, and they've made them now successful businesses because they had the right mindset to deliver. And yeah, it's incredibly important. You've got to have the skill. Actually, excuse me, it's part of my favorite quote, which I know you like to keep to the end. So maybe we'll come back to that at the end. But the second part of my kind of favorite quote will tie in nicely to the mindset element. So there's a second half to my quote.
An old coach once said to me, go the extra mile, it's never crowded. And that stuck with me forever, because that's just so you can apply that to any situation, whether it's running, whether it's hockey, whether it's business. It's like, just do that little bit, because you're probably on your own doing it. So it's that difference, isn't it?
An extra 1% every day. Like I see all these quotes. Like my Instagram feed is just full of like motivational quotes and stuff. But like that little bit of extra 1% every day. I think it was Phil Neville, I think, once said, he used to do an extra 1 press up, didn't do 10, he'd do 11. Just it all adds up.
So when I was younger, I used to turn up to the hockey pitch like hours before anyone else did, and I used to reverse hit ball after ball after ball, because I knew by the time they turned up, they were hitting their first ball, I was already on my 100th, and it was like an internal like satisfaction that I needed to. But it's that extra bit, isn't it? It's that extra bit that nobody else was doing. So
the bit that no one sees, right? Usain Bolt changed his life in 10 seconds around that, wasn't it? But no one sees the hours and hours and hours of training meant that he could perfect that, so he could run the 100 meters in the world record time. So I was going to come
up with another quote then, Michael, but I actually just think that we could just, between us, we could just
bash quotes off all day, couldn't we, towards each other, just sending quotes left, right and centre. Yeah.
I know, because my other favourite one is while you were sleeping. So at 5 a.m. when I'm running, I run past all these houses with all the lights off, and I think, while you were sleeping, and I love it.
No, it's too right. And there is so many great kind of quotes like that, and I
Well,
kind of use them a lot to kind of inspire me to kind of when you're having that tough day, because life isn't easy, right? You get your tough days, you get your
yeah.
hard days, and actually having that little moment's good.
Yeah. So what is it that you're striving for? You know, is there a point where you think, do you know what? That's where I want to get to, and then I'll be satisfied. I'll be like, Michael, you've made it.
Um, I think it's very dangerous to kind of pick points to kind of get to, because, you know, I used to say with the broadcasting when I used to go into to schools and talk about that, and I would be like, look, you know, saying you want to host match of the day is mission impossible. Like one person gets to host match of the day, but saying you want to
Yeah.
be a sports broadcaster creates opportunity because you'll achieve that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, look, there's loads of little things I'd like to tick off and things I'd like to achieve. There's things I'd like to do. Some things I'll get to do, some things I won't. But as kind of cheesy and as corny as it sounds, my thing has always been just wake up every day and love what you do and surround yourself with people
Yeah.
that kind of support you. And if I can wake up every day and have the freedom of choice to do the things I love and to help people be the best they can possibly be, that's the pinnacle for me. Yes, there's little things I like to achieve, little things, but the be all and end all. If it doesn't ever happen, it doesn't ever happen. Like I can get close to it, I can do it. You know, there's some things I've tried to do in the last couple of years which haven't happened, and maybe that's just the world telling me, well, maybe they're not for you right now,
Mm.
and maybe it's not for you. So I like to have little things would like to achieve and tick boxes, but there's not necessarily one thing that means, oh, I've made it. I think just having that freedom of choice to be able to do fun things, to be able to love my profession. You know, if I can do that 70% of the time and there's 30% of the time I've got to do stuff I don't really want to do, but I need to do the fun stuff, I'll do it. But I think, yeah, kind of, as I say, lots of little things that maybe I'd like to do on a personal level and on a business level. But for me, the ultimate game is just wake up every day, love what you do, generate happiness for you and the people around you, and I genuinely get a real buzz from helping people be successful, and helping people with the best they can be. You know, I've helped to make a couple of mates publish books. I've helped a couple of friends do a few other bits and pieces, and that's what makes me tick. You know, seeing a friend or someone I care about achieving, I'm like, yeah, I love that. If I can, and I don't want people to go, oh yeah, Michael helped him do that. I don't care about that. I just like to stand on the sidelines and go, yeah, well done, you've done it, and
Yeah.
just
So I guess for
personally,
you then,
internally.
is it more just in the journey then is probably more important than the end destination? You don't have sort of a set end place where you're going. It's just actually, it's about the everyday journey that you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. Like the journey's so important, right? That's what makes the memories. That's what, you know, when you're sat there, hopefully when we all get to like 90 years old, sat in our rocking chairs, rocking backwards and forwards, boring our family with stories of what we've done. That's more important than, oh, I did that once. Like, no, look, this is it. You know, obviously you want to create a lifestyle for my family, so they, you know, that we can everyone in my family and friends can have the fun choices, and have that opportunity to be the best they can be. But yeah, I think the journey is the most important part. That's what teaches you the most. The hard bits, the
Yeah.
easy bits, the fun bits, the reward. It's all about the journey.
Oh my goodness, I absolutely love it. So, who would you say then is the biggest influence in the decisions you make in your everyday life?
Oh, such a tough decision. I get so there's just so many people that kind of inspire me. I think that's like the big thing for me. My great granddad's a massive one. He's like my moral compass. When I was doing my military training, and a lot of time, if I'm at a big meeting, I have a replica of his George medal, which I keep in my kind of jacket pocket. So when I was out in
Oh,
the field, cold, wet, and hungry, I had his medal in my jacket pocket of my army stuff. Um, so yeah, so
love
he's
that.
a kind of big moral compass for me. Like what kind of he would he do? What would he think? Which I don't know. So I guess that's a bit of a blessing because I never got to meet him. So there isn't some kind of expectation of stuff I've got to achieve that he would have done that is kind of actually set in a way. But I think I use him as my moral compass in the sense of that, you know, he went to war to serve a country. You know, he didn't go to war, you know, lightheartedly. He had to go and he conscripted and he made that choice to serve, and you know he tried to save someone's life in the middle of a minefield, and obviously got honored for that. But you know he made a split second decision that put his life at risk to try and save someone else. So I kind of always try and keep that in kind of my thoughts with decision making and where I want to go. historical figures, I'm an absolute history geek. Like literally, I'm a weirdo. Like with history stuff. Love learning from history, what people have done well, what people have done badly, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. So, massive fan of Sir Winston Churchill, and I'm just working on my my second motivational book at the moment, which comes out in September, and part of the end of it is my favorite leaders, but the most important part of the paragraph and section on each of them is what were their weaknesses and what can we actually learn from them. Because no one's perfect, and it's great to put people on pedestals, but it's important at the same time to kind of go, okay, well, how can I learn from them? Because you don't learn from victory, you learn from defeat. So how did their time as a leader end? How did their time as a leader not be successful? So I like looking at those elements as well. So yeah, lots of people inspire me, lots of things inspire me. So yeah, I can't really pinpoint one particular. But again, my great granddad's a big one. King George, Winston Churchill. Yeah,
I love that.
Born like a couple of generations too late, but there we go.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you absolutely were. So, I mean, I know that we have rattled off quote after quote after quote, but I'm still going to stick by my guns and still ask that final question that I always ask everybody. So, what one quote do you strive to live by that inspires you the most?
So, it's a Muhammad Ali quote. So, I was obsessed by Muhammad Ali from a very, very young age. I just saw this poster once when I was a kid in a poster shop with him stood over Sonny Liston when he did that famous kind of phantom punch and became world champion. And then I got researching his story and what an amazing guy. And actually, I talk about Muhammad Ali lots when I go into schools and businesses and say, look, yes, he was the greatest boxer of all time, heavyweight world champion. But actually what he fought for outside of the ring was more important, what he did for humanity and racism and standing up for all those things. He gave away some of the best years of his career because he refused to go to the Vietnam War and he stood up for racism and stood up for everything. He famously said, if you can't stand up for my own rights here, why do you want me to go and fight against the people that I don't know in another country? Threw his Olympic medal into the river because they wouldn't serve him a coffee. He went to his coffee shop and they said, we don't serve your kind here. And what he did for human rights and for people, for me, was an incredible battle that he fought and made big strides towards, as well as what he did in the boxing ring, which was incredible as well. So I was obsessed by one of his quotes from a very young age, and it's where my whole desire, dream, vision thing comes from, which is kind of my hashtag, my phrase. My first book's called that. My mantra is desire, dream, vision, desire it, dream about it, visualize it. But it is inspired by this quote, which is from Muhammad Ali, which is that champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something deep inside, a desire, a dream, and a vision. And that's the first part. And then the second part is, but you've got to have the skill and the will, and the will has to be stronger than the skill, because you've got to have the will when the time gets tough to do that extra set of press ups, to do that extra little mile, which ties back into what we said earlier. You've got to have the skill and the will, but the will's got to be stronger than the skill because you're going to have tough times. So it's a nice little double bit of a quote, but it's my favorite one that I kind of live by. I've still got the original post-it note, which I wrote it on God knows how many years ago now on my bathroom mirror. So it's becoming kind of coming up with the steam from the showers, making it fall apart soon. I have to try and protect it somehow. But yeah,
laminate it.
Yeah, do something with it. So that's my quote to live by, is that champions aren't made in gyms, made from something deep inside, a desire, a dream, and a vision. And that all ties into DDV, desire it, dream about it, visualize it.
I absolutely could not love that anymore. It's absolutely brilliant. And what a brilliant way to end the conversation. I honestly feel like I could talk to you for hours. So thank you so much for coming and, sharing your story and sharing your journey with us.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Cheers.
I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, then it would be awesome if you could leave a rating or a review. Don't forget to subscribe so you can listen to us again. See you soon.